Okay, I've been doing a sermon series on Martyrs and Mercies. Now, I loved Dylan's last week, and notice what we're introducing is the martyrs is not, oh, don't be such a martyr. It's a witness. I'm inviting all of us to be a martyr of faith, and a martyr is not simply I'm going to give up my life, but we often celebrate people who do great things, incredible things. You're like, oh my goodness, I wish I could be as successful as them. Even if they're financial people. I look at Stephen Curtis Chapman and I go, he does great music and he's so successful and he's so rich and he loves Jesus. But we don't realize some of the things Stephen Curtis Chapman has gone through, or any of those people we look up to that went through the valley of death. And I'm encouraging us to be a stronger witness, not because of where we end up of our promises that have been fulfilled, but the faith through the struggles to that end. So a real quick summary, a recap. Go ahead, Brooks, give me that. A martyr is a witness who makes sacrifices sacred. Now, I love that you guys are taking this. You're like, what I do is not woe is me, I have to go to work today. What I do is sacred. Even if it doesn't seem like it changes the world overnight, when you realize that the things that you do for other people is a sacred task that God has given you, it's pretty special, and you see it differently. And you're doing the sacred work, especially as a Christian, of training and serving. And I want to emphasize that we're still in that training space. We'll never get out of that. You've never accomplished your perfect faith. And you're always training to serve others. And last week, Dylan did a really good job of talking about serving others in communion. I loved how he presented communion. He said it could be anything. Do you guys remember what he said? It could even be a brisket? Like, what was that? Came out of nowhere where he's like, it could be a brisket. I'm like, God love you, Dylan. I think we need to do communion with briskets now. Like, Matt, where you at, buddy? We are smoking up some briskets. Communion would be so much different. I love that. But I also love that you catch his compare and contrast. He's like, it could be a brisket, but instead it's bread, because bread is what they eat all the time. I also loved how he compared it with his doing a fast with a buddy of his. And notice that the fast invoked Jesus' presence more. And so even though we take that little communion wafer and that little cup, that isn't what it really means. What it means is communion. Communion with Jesus, who is the original martyr of faith, the greatest witness of God's work through him in our lives. And then how are we as disciples around that table? Are we like the 10 that just aren't sure what's going on yet? Are we rebellious in spirit like Judas? Are we rebellious in spirit and stubborn like Peter? Are we confessing like Peter, right? And then who are the not yets? Who are the people that aren't with us that God tells us through Christ to keep sharing? Okay, so that's what we've been talking about as a martyr, a witness, a sacredness. I'm going to invite none other than Kenzie Cunningham to come up. She's going to share her story this morning. She just jumps up here like she's just young, and I'm like, don't fall.
Wait, I'm going to grab a tissue because
She gets emotional.
my
Actually,
nose kept dripping the last time.
is Ben watching? Can I tease about Ben? He's the emotional one.
No, he should be at work.
He's at work, so I can make fun of him all I want. So Ben and Kenzie, Kenzie been a part of our church. They got married in April of 2016. In the space of time in that, when she got married, we had that wonderful wedding. I remember the food.
Yeah.
Pancake breakfast.
Everyone remembers the food.
I think I had to start keto after that. I was in sugar shock from the syrup.
So good. It was so good.
Then she started working for the church. We had a really fun 4 years. She was here in the office doing a lot of things she's actually come back full circle to do now, which we could talk about in a little bit. But most people don't know that out of the last couple of years, getting married was some challenges in her life and situation that I think you shared, but I don't think most people here would know. So where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about that getting married and the starting a family?
Yeah, I think let's start when I left, because that's kind of, what you guys don't know about.
Yeah.
I was here working for the church for about 4 years, and then my husband and I moved to Texas. My husband works for Shields. He worked at the Springfield store after we got married, and
So Kenzie had a great job, and Ben had an okay job. And they took Ben's okay job and left whatever. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So we decided to move to Texas, but that decision was very hard for us. I remember meeting with Ryan before we even signed on to do it. We had the offer for his job.
Right.
And I remember going into your office, and all three of us are like sobbing. Like, what do we do?
You're
Do we make this
leaving
decision?
me.
Like, this is what we thought we wanted, but it's really hard to make this decision. But really what was happening behind the scenes of all of that, see, my nose is already, it's too cold here. It's too cold here. I'm sorry. It was 80 degrees in my house yesterday. So what was happening behind the scenes that some of you are aware of, we were going through a season of fertility struggles. And so we got married in 2016. We always said, give us 2 years. Don't ask us if we're having kids until we've been married for 2 years. Like, we want to be just the two of us. And so a little before that 2 years is up, we were like, okay, maybe now's the time. We'll start trying to have a baby. And wasn't working.
Right.
We kept it pretty under the table for the first year, and then, after that, it starts to come out like, yeah, actually, this is a struggle for us. Like, we're gonna have to start figuring out what's going on, figure out if there's any diagnoses, like what's in the way.
Right.
And so that was a really hard season for us. And in that time, you're making plans of your life. Every young couple loves to make plans, right? Like, we're gonna get married, we're gonna do this, we're gonna have a boy first, and it's going to be born when we've been married for 2 years, and we're going to name it this, and you have this whole plan of, we're going to live here, and I'm working for the church, and I'm sure Ryan would let me bring a baby to work for a while when they're a newborn.
Right.
That would be super great, not have to put them in daycare right away, all these plans, right?
And your plans always line up, right? Until you start having kids, you know when you're getting married, you plan the wedding, all the details of the wedding, and then you get married. And I do remember you coming into the office. It sort of grew with a heavier heart.
Over time, it got really hard. And if you're any of the students that were in when I was leading the youth group at that time, they were very aware of those hard emotions that I was having. When we went to camp, there was a whole thing, but they were very aware. So by the end of it, everyone was pretty in the loop of what was going on with us. And we thought, okay, life isn't happening the way we wanted it to.
Right.
So let's go on an adventure. Let's go do something new. Let's go try it out. We only had to commit for 2 years, so if we don't like it, we'll come back. Not a big deal.
Sure.
We'll go do something new. So January 2020, first week of January, I think it was January 3rd, because we didn't want to move on Scarlett's birthday.
Right.
We moved the next day.
Yeah.
And
that's when you left me and your parents and your sister and your family.
And everyone behind. And Callie cried. And we moved to Texas. And everything was great. We started new jobs. I started working for Shields. Long story short, spoiler alert, we got pregnant 3 weeks after moving.
Yay!
2.5 years of nothing and wondering and waiting and PCOS diagnosis and all this stuff. And essentially we were like, okay, we're moving, take it off the table. We're not, we have to move. We have to focus on that.
Right.
3 weeks later, we end up conceiving our sweet little Logan. She's right over there. She's so cute. We didn't know for another few weeks when, whenever you don't expect, something isn't happening for you for so long, you start to think it's never going to happen. And so in your mind, it's not even a possibility. So that was kind of the boat we were in at this point. We were working. At this point, I was having 12-hour days at work because we were setting a new Shields store. And I started not feeling well. And I thought it was maybe dehydration, working 12-hour days, literally for weeks, 12-hour days, and it was a lot. And I was like, well, maybe, I guess I didn't drink enough water, maybe I'm not eating right. We went out to dinner with a group I was working with that week, and that night I woke up in the middle of the night, not feeling well, and it never left. And I was 5 days into this, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
Better go see a doctor.
And my mom, so subtly says, honey, do you think you should take a test to find out if it's... And I said, no, Mom. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? I actually was kind of irritated. I'm like, why would I do that? No, that's not what it is. I just don't feel well. I'm working these long days. No, that's not what it is. Well, the nurse in the ER confirmed that it was whenever we went. Because after 5 days of not feeling well, I woke up with a sharp pain in my stomach, and I felt like I was going to throw up, but I couldn't. And Ben was like, what if you have appendicitis? What if it's your gallbladder? Like, what if something's going on? Like, it was fine when you didn't feel well. Now you have a sharp pain. Like, we have to take you to the doctor. We go to the doctor. I think it's so funny. We go in. They're like, okay, like, we'll get you some medicine. We'll get you some pain meds. We'll get you some nausea medicine. We'll try and figure out what's going on. But we need a urine sample first. I'm like, oh, okay, well, obviously. Because, if you're a woman in this room, sorry, men, but if you're a woman, the one question that the doctor always asks when you go, when was your last? Okay, and I was so prepared for that question every time because of with my PCOS, right? So I was like, it was a long time ago. That's not what it is. I don't feel well. Please help me.
It's appendicitis.
It's just fine. And so she's like, okay, well, we need a urine sample. So I go, urine sample. I come back. And she's like, just leave it right here when you get back. So I come in and I leave it on the table. And next to it is an open pregnancy test, just waiting. And I remember looking at it and I literally laughed out loud to Ben. And I was like, she already has it out. Like, that's not what it is. Well, then she comes back in. She's doing her whole thing. I can't see what she's doing. I'm, like, facing this way. And the nurse leans over. She's like, is there any way you could be pregnant? And I quote myself. After 2.5 years of infertility, it's highly unlikely. Just like that. That's what I said. She looks at me, she goes, well, and she holds the test up. And I just like deer in headlights look at Ben. He's sitting right in front of me, and I'm just, okay. She's like, okay, so we can't give you pain meds. We can give you some nausea stuff. We can't give you pain meds.
Thanks
We're going to do blood work, and we're going to take you for an ultrasound.
Right.
And I was like, okay. Because, at this point, it's like, what? Like, I'm in shock. Like, this is not happening.
And can we just point out that Abraham and Sarah was like for 70 years going through that? And when you go 2.5, you're looking at this going,
this is my reality.
yes.
Yeah.
This
is how it's going to be.
It's amazing how we do expect things on our time, and then we're surprised when, yeah.
No.
And I love that part where you're like, I laughed. I'm like,
I laughed.
yeah, just like Sarah.
I laughed just like Sarah. So I laughed. And anyway, and I always like to bring in the story of Gideon at this point, too. So relate to him in this moment, because you know how Gideon, God tells him he's going to be a great warrior, and he's like, me? No, not me.
Right.
And he tests God. He's like, well, God, do on the fleece, not on the grass. God does it, and he's like, still not convinced. Like, reverse it, do it the other way. And so they tell us there were a positive pregnancy test, and she's like, okay, so we're going to do blood work, we're going to do ultrasound. She comes in with the blood work. Well, she leaves the room, and I look at Ben, and I say, I'm not believing it until I see the blood work. So she comes back in, and she's like, yeah, so your levels should be, like, really down here, and, like, my levels were super high. It was, like, 1,000 times what it should be. She's like, so you're pregnant? And I was like, okay. She leaves the room again, and in my Gideon moment, I look at Ben, and I go, I'm not believing it till I see an ultrasound. Like, just complete disbelief of what the Lord is doing in my life. And I'm like, absolutely not. This isn't happening. Like, the pen's gonna drop, right? Like, it's not actually. Sure enough, ultrasound. I'm 6 weeks pregnant already, and we go through 2020. Y'all know how that year was. We have a baby in October. Unplanned cesarean from fetal D cells. Kind of a crazy little bit, slightly traumatic little experience. But we got to bring home a precious baby girl who was absolutely healthy, just an absolute vision of health, so cute. Answer to the Lord, like to our prayers, like, and I know it was a culmination of not only my prayers and Ben's prayers, but it was also a lot of your prayers too, and so we're really grateful for that.
So when Kenzie and I were talking about her coming and visiting, and maybe she'd lead worship, maybe she'd share her story, I didn't realize when we started talking about it that it extended beyond the story of Logan. So coming to fruition, I go, that was amazing. As patient as you had to be, and you had to wait on God's timing, and you had to go on this adventure to Texas and start your life and have the challenges that you face and be able to have this moment. But then Kenzie brought up 2023. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we knew that, in more planning of your life, we wanted to have our kids about 3 years apart. We thought that was a good age gap, mostly because the first one's going to most likely be out of diapers by then.
Sure.
Yeah. So we want to separate that. So
3 years apart.
So at the end of 2022, Logan turns 2. We're like, okay, so this is the window to get him about 3 years apart. So having conversations, and whenever you've had such a hard time with fertility in the past, it's really hard to step into that season to say, okay, we're going to do this again. We're going to open our hearts up to this again. We're going to commit to saying, like, this is a trying season for us. And so as we went into 2023, I was really like, okay, kind of scared, like, we're going to step into this, like, it needs to be now. I'm like, my heart, like, has a little bit of some trauma from before, and a little bit of anxiety about that. And the church that we go to back in Texas, the lead pastor, he does a fast every January, and it's for 2 weeks, and you can fast from different things. Think like Lent fasting, but instead of doing it Lent, they do it in January at the beginning of the year. And so you can, fast social media, soda, whatever. Some of them do a full actual fast of like no food, which is very difficult, I learned this year. And so I don't remember what I was fasting from in 2023, but I do remember one day it was in the middle of the fast, and I was in a time of prayer about like just Lord, what do you want to do? Like, I'm not necessarily asking you for anything, but God, what do you want to do this year? Like, what do you want to do in our lives? Because I think we can tell God what we want all the time, but we rarely sit to listen, like, God, what do you want? What do you want to do? And so I was in this prayer time, and I remember in the middle of January, I was sitting in my driveway in shorts and a t-shirt, and Logan's coloring a chalk on the driveway in the sun, and I'm just reading my Bible. I love to journal my prayers. It helps me keep on track, because whenever you start to pray, and then all of a sudden you're like, I need to do I need to wash the bedding, and I need to make sure to get chicken at the grocery store, and like it just kind of goes off, and you're like, oh wait, I was praying, okay, back at it. So it just helps me stay on track. And so I'm like writing down some prayers and spending time with God, and we can show you what I wrote in my journal that year. I wrote down, you can't see the date at the top, but at the top of the page, I'm pretty sure it says January 9th, 2023. And I wrote down that God's promises for 2023 were going to be that I was going to grow my family and become a stay-at-home mom. Now, I'm working full-time in Dallas. It is not cheap. Being a stay-at-home mom was the farthest thing from reality for us. But I felt a nudging of the Lord. I heard God's voice, and I wrote it down. I said, okay, well, we'll see. We'll see what comes of it.
Right.
So what we didn't know at the time is that we actually conceived during that fast. As it goes, and if you're a woman, the thing's not coming at the time it's supposed to, and you're starting to think like, that's interesting. So this is now in like mid-February. I'm driving home from work one day, and I'm like, okay, it's been a long time. Like, that's not unusual for me, but this is kind of a longer time than usual, so I don't know. It could be, it could not. And I have Logan in the back seat singing her little kid, songs. We're jamming, and I'm driving down the road, and so I just started to pray, because I'm like, no, I think I'll wait another week. I think I'll wait another week, and if nothing is showing itself, I'll take a test then. Then I will be sure, right? But I'm just going to wait another week. And I'm driving, and I'm praying, and I have never had this experience before in my life, and I've never had it since. This was such a strong feeling that I had, where I was driving, praying about like, well, should I just go ahead and take a test when I get home, or should I wait? And I felt a physical embrace on my body as I'm driving down the road. I can still remember like pressure on my arms, like someone was holding me. And I knew it was the Lord saying, you can do this. You can go home. You can take this test. Like, I got you. I got you. It's going to be okay. And so I went home, and I got Logan a little snack, put her distracted over here, put on a little show, give her a little snack, and I went into the bathroom. I take a test. It was immediately positive. Immediately positive. And, you have your whole, like, you're excited, but you're also now freaking out because you're like, oh, man, like, we're doing this, I guess. And Ben comes home from work a little bit later, and like I have my camera set up. We take a little video of me, like I pull out the test and I show him, and he does his whole like freak out, and it's so special time. We went and got Taco Bell to celebrate, and
always Taco Bell. That's a celebration.
Come on,
meal.
that's our food. Okay, we will never be too good. That's actually the first place we ever ate together, but that was college times. And so we come home, put the kids to bed, and we get in bed. Well, I had taken that test at 5 p.m. when I got home from work, and I started bleeding at 5 a.m. the next day. I woke up, and I was like, something doesn't feel right. Went to the bathroom, and as you can imagine. And so I was having an early miscarriage. I would have been probably just before 6 weeks at the time. So not that early changes anything, but it was early, and in that moment, I was so mad. I was so mad.
God gives you this vision for 2023.
He gave me this vision for 2023. You already, like that, it was only 12 hours, but you can do a lot of planning in 12 hours, right? You can dream up a lot of things in your head in 12 hours. And I'm like, at that point, like, so this baby's going to be born around Logan's birthday. They're going to be exactly 3 years apart. That's exactly what we always planned. All of these things, and it all just was gone. And not only that, but God, you told me to take this test.
By the embrace.
You told me to. I was driving. I asked you, and you told me it was okay. And now this is not okay. Like, what's going on? And it took a lot of yelling at God and crying and telling Ben how just absolutely forgotten I felt, and how cruel. That was the word I used a lot. How cruel it felt from God. Because I could have not, and I could have woke up the next day and just thought, oh, well, that was just a fluke. That was weird. And move on and not think anything of it.
Sure.
So why? Why did you have me do that? And I now know, it took me a few days, but I knew that embrace was not for getting home and taking the test. That embrace was because he knew he was having me do that. And he knew it was to come the next day. And so he wasn't holding me through that positive test. He was holding me through the miscarriage. And it took a lot of time to get there, to know that. But I was very thankful for that. And not only that, I think that, in all my questioning, well, why did you make me do that? Why did you make me do that? He knew it was to come 2 weeks later without trying, when we conceived again and still had a baby by December. Like, he knew it all.
Right.
He knew it all, and he knew what he was doing. And even though he had to kind of drag me through the dirt, it felt like, he had me the whole time.
Now, there's a moment in there that you're now going to this church,
Yep.
and you have
Such a
this,
powerful thing.
you have a miscarriage, and you're going to volunteer.
Yeah, so what's so crazy, so at the same time we're having this fast and everything in January, our lead pastor that year, he was very, our church is very charismatic, I will say, and they're very loud. Very loud. They're very outspoken, and he was really big on pushing, like, anyone can hear the voice of God. Like, anyone can, and it's not an audible voice, it's usually a thought. And anyone can hear God, anyone can prophesy, anyone, like, you can go pray over someone. You can hear from God and know what he wants you to tell someone. And so I was actually set to serve when I took the test on a Friday night, miscarried Saturday morning. I was set to serve at church the next day. And my team lead, her name was Wendy, I texted her Sunday morning and I said, hey, I'm not feeling well. I can't make it today. And she's like, yeah, no problem. Hope you feel better. Well, the next Sunday I was also supposed to serve. And so our church does worship run through before service where people who are serving can come to worship. So if they're like serving nursery or something and they're going to miss worship that day, they can still come in and feel the presence of God and have prayer time over the service and just worship with everyone. And so I was like, I need to go early today. I need to go early. I need to be in worship. I need to just like be with the Lord. And so I went early to worship run through, and I'm in there. I'm like singing along, worshiping. I sit down to pray, and Wendy, my team lead, she walks over and she says, hey, can I pray for you? And I'm like, yes, absolutely, please. And so she sits next to me and she starts praying, and I have absolutely no idea what any of the prayer settings.
And chronologically, you're past the miscarriage, but you're not pregnant.
No.
So this is still the space of
we're
the
a week later.
anger and the.
We're angry. I'm starting to come to that realization of like, okay, no, God said he had me, and this is why. But you're still in that. It doesn't take the hurt away.
Right.
It doesn't take that. You don't automatically go, okay, God, so I forgive you and all's well. It's like, no, I'm still kind of mad. I'm still kind of upset about that.
And so then what did Wendy pray?
And so Wendy said, she was praying over me. Remember, we're in this like big prophesy, go pray over people thing. And she said, I feel like God is saying that you're disappointed in him.
Ouch.
I lost it. Absolutely lost it. And I've never been much of an emotional person. I'm such an emotional person since I became a mom. Like, catch me crying all the time. And I just lost it. And later on, she asked me, she's like, did that mean something to you? Because that felt what did she say? She said, that felt really harsh to say. And I wasn't sure if I should have said it. And I said, Wendy, I wasn't sick last week. I was having a miscarriage. And you could tell she had never had that experience either. So we both are like, this is wild. What is happening? But I also knew, I'm like, God embraced me before he knew. Like before I knew. Before he led me through this whole journey. And then through Wendy, he reminded me, I see you. I know you're mad at me.
Right.
I know you don't like what I did. But I still see you, and I hear you. And I'm so thankful that we have a God who is big enough to take it. He's so big, and he can take all of our anger. He can take all of our sadness. Like, we don't have to just wrap it up in a bow all the time and say, well, I'm really mad about this, but it's all good, God. Like, it's okay. We're still besties. Like, you can be like, God, what is going on?
Right.
Like, why did you do that? I'm so mad at you right now.
Yes.
And I'm just so thankful that, he can take that. And so I'm, going through these feelings, and we'll fast forward a little bit. Spoiler alert. We get pregnant. So after this encounter with Wendy, we conceived a week later without knowing.
Yeah.
And that was also its own journey, after you had heartbreak and loss. I remember I filmed the first one. I had it ready. I was going to show Ben. It was going to be this big moment. And we found out we were pregnant again. It was the day after his birthday, I remember, and he had a closing shift, so he didn't get home until like 10:30 that night. And when he walked in, I was sitting in bed reading, and I just had the test on my nightstand. That was it. No big to-do, nothing, no big celebration.
Yeah, that's
he
the
walked
second.
in
That's
and
the second born.
he looked at my nightstand and he said, is that new or old? And I just said, here we go again.
Oh.
Here we go again. Now, what we didn't know is it was going to turn into our sweet little Turner Kate back there.
Right.
She is an absolute joy. Yeah, I see you.
Hi,
You saying
Toyna.
hi. Hi. It was actually prophesied over her while I was pregnant from one of the pastors of our church. She prophesied over her that she would be a healer of hearts.
Yeah.
And so after all of our journey and everything going through that, and I had an unplanned cesarean, which was a little bit traumatic. I had the absolute best birth experience with her, and she has been absolutely healing my heart.
Yeah. So Kenzie also shared, going through this as we wrap up, that one of the things that was special in 2023 was going through the Bible.
Yeah.
Did you go through the whole Bible?
I went through the whole Bible, so I had never done it before. And whenever I was going into the year of 2023, I felt like I was in this spot of like, I want more of God. I don't want more from God. I want more of God. And
Preach.
I was kind of just like, God had led me away from like listening to any like secular music or anything like that. I wasn't filling space with that. And I was really just focused on him. And so I really wanted to just hear from him. I wanted to feel close to him. I had felt close to him. The closest I had ever felt to him was when I was going through our fertility struggles the first time.
Sure.
And I would always say that, like, I just felt so close to God, and I haven't felt that close since. And so I was going into 2023, like, God, I want to know you better.
Yeah.
I want to hear from you more. And so I decided in that January too that I was going to read through the Bible. And it wasn't like some big thing that I planned. I actually was at work one day, and I worked in the freight room of Shields, where I was hanging and folding clothes all day. And we would often put in headphones and listen to music, because you cannot talk to the same person for 40 hours a week every day. It's a lot. And so we would often just have our headphones in, and I started listening to podcasts more, because I really just wanted more. And I was listening to Christian podcasts and motherhood podcasts. And I remember one day I was specifically listening to a podcast that was about how to make time to read your Bible as a mom. And I was listening to this podcast. It was probably about 30 minutes long. And as I'm listening to this podcast, I had this light bulb go off of like, which maybe some of you are like, well, duh. But I was like, wow, epiphany. You're spending this time listening to a podcast about how you could about how to read your Bible when you could be listening to the Bible. Like, you're filling your space with all this noise, and like, if you want to have time to read through the Bible, like, here it is.
Read the Bible.
Open the Bible app and hit play.
Yep.
Because there's an audiobook feature in the Bible app, if you didn't know. So I immediately just turned it on, Genesis 1:1. Here we go. And I listened through Genesis, and I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to read the whole Bible front to back, just in order. And what I didn't know at the time was that I would finish the last page of Revelation while holding my newborn baby at the end of the year. But
Isn't that beautiful?
it was such a powerful year, being so rooted in the Word, gaining context for my faith. I think when you grow up in a Christian family, sometimes when that's all you know, you
Sure.
miss out on some of that context.
Take it for granted.
Yeah, like, it's just, yeah, Jesus loves me and I know that. Oh, whoop, whoop. Jesus loves me and I know it, and like Easter, I know he died for me, since like the whole thing. Like, I get it, like bullet points, but like to actually read through the Bible and have the context, like, I understand the Old Testament's kind of like Snoresville sometimes. Like, Numbers is tough, okay? Numbers is so tough. But to know the whole story really just built up my faith. And then being a mom has also strengthened my faith, and
Right.
wanting to know the Bible more so that I can teach my kids about the Bible more.
Right.
And so that year, I think was my absolute best year. And our lead pastor at our church, he also, coming into this year, he kept saying this phrase. He kept saying, if 2025 is your best year spiritually, it will be your best year ever. And I heard that, and I was like, man, 2023 was a year that I really was seeking the face of God. I was really wanting more of God. I was really searching for him, and I was really focused on him, and it was my best year. It was the year that I heard him the loudest I've ever heard him in my life. And it's the loudest I've heard him since. Because, you get into postpartum the next year, and trying to, I become a stay-at-home mom only by the grace of God. without a plan.
Right.
We went down to a one-income family just based off of this. Like, okay, well, he gave us a family. Like, he grew our family, so
Yeah.
I said this, and our daycare can't take the baby, so I guess we're just going to pull them both, and I'm going to stay home, and we'll figure that out. Little did Ryan know that 3 weeks later, when he called me out of the blue to offer me a job,
Help!
that it was the final answer to the promises of God. But I just think I look back and like, man, 2024 wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. It's a little complacent.
Sure.
A little bit just content. And like, what if I actually, by the end of the year, started to realize that, and I picked up and read through the New Testament, using the Bible recap. If you've never used it, it is amazing.
Right.
But and just realizing, like, man, 2023 was the best year because I really was focused on the Lord.
Right.
And I want to be back in that.
Right. So that's where we're going to conclude our service today, with that invitation. If you wonder what 2025 is going to look like, I asked the worship team, and they did say, they're like, hey, we just went into the deep end too fast. What do you want to grow into spiritually this year? What does that look like? I can give you some very easy tipping points. Can you grow into generosity financially and stop asking God to fix your finances before you get right with God in stewardship? Maybe it's growing in your faith through God's word. It's right in front of you. You know, it's that door of these small groups to say, I'm going to do this more. And I got news for you. If those Wednesday nights don't work out, I have an open door policy. Stop waiting to say, hey, can we do a men's group? Can we do a women's group? What would that look like? I've talked to some of you. The only challenge I have is that I'm not going to take it and run with it just because you had an idea. We the people, of the people, for the people, by the people. I'll be your greatest cheerleader. I'll come alongside. I'll help you with resources. But if it's a once a month, if it's a Zoom, if it's a podcast series, whatever it is, the question I'm asking you is, why are you waiting for God to just sort of do the vending machine moment that you throw up a prayer and he's going to deliver, when he's decidedly encouraging us to know him more? Where is that passion? Who is going to be the Wendy in other people's lives? How are you going to grow in your faith? So